What's going on, everyone? It's Mike from Allstar Tactical, and welcome to another episode of Get Educated. I've got Jake here with me again, and this time we're going to move on to AR's Part 2, specifically malfunctions. So both recognizing them and how to deal with them. So we'll start everything off like we always do, our firearm safety rules. Number 1, treat all firearms as if they are loaded. Number 2, never point the firearm at anything you're not willing to kill, destroy, or purchase. Number 3, keep your finger somewhere other than the trigger until your sights are on target and you've made the conscious decision to shoot. And number 4, be sure of what is in front of, behind, to the left, and to the right of your target. Alright, so we got a fairly basic AR. This is one of our original Delta rifle custom builds for people. One of our original lowers. Good rifle to kind of show you guys some malfunctions here. So unfortunately, this is a slick side upper, so we're not really going to show any manipulation of the forward assist. As I mentioned in our previous video, I'm not a huge fan of the forward assist in general because most of the time it causes a malfunction to be worse, or really doesn't help. Typically it was added to the original M16s and M4s because of the hazardous environments they were in. If there was any issue with the bolt lockup, it would push it slightly forward here. So again, this rifle, I'm going to visually and physically check that it is unloaded. All right, so right now it's unloaded. We've got a mag, and so let's talk about simple malfunctions that may happen. So your fire control devices could malfunction. Not really something you would clear on the range or while shooting, but if say your safety fell off or simple malfunctions like that, there's going to be malfunctions that are above and beyond simple repair versus say bringing it to a qualified gunsmith. Things like a squib load, obstruction in the barrel, that's not stuff you really want to mess with out in the field. So we'll talk about, I think, 5 or so of your typical malfunctions, and you may know them by other terms. I'm going to try and use the proper term, but I'll also talk about what else they will be called. There's to diagnose your malfunction is we're going to look at, we don't necessarily need to look at the rifle. We're going to do it by feel. So you've got two possible options for your trigger. Right, so your trigger can click. All right, I'm sure you heard that click. Or you could have a dead trigger. All right, and that is going to be a fairly good clue to what is going on with the rifle here. All right, so let's set up this first malfunction here. So our first malfunction, all right, I'm going to lock the bolt back. Actually, I didn't need to take that one out. I'm going to take one of these spent brass casings, and this is just to simulate it. I'm going to stick it down in the chamber there. All right, and this may be a little difficult to see. I'm going to try my best so that you could see into.
Tilt it down a little bit.
Down.
There you go.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, so you can kind of see. Move your drink. You can kind of see what's going on here, and we've got this. Typically, is called a double feed, is what people will call it, but it's not a true double feed. We call this a linear malfunction. So this is very specifically a failure to extract. All right, so you've got the ammo or the round that was in there went off. For whatever reason, it cycled. It did not strip the spent casing out of the chamber, and it went and rammed another round home behind it. All right, a linear malfunction. So what's our trigger going to feel like? Mush. So it is not far enough forward for the trigger to even reset back onto the sear. All right, so to clear this malfunction, this one is somewhat simple. All right, we're going to remove the ammunition source. All right, we're going to lock it back. All right, and we're going to reach up underneath the mag well and hopefully knock that loose and hope that the other one comes out. We're going to rack it a couple times. All right, that may cause the extractor to pick up on that piece of brass. Now, there's a number of reasons that this could happen, from a weak extractor that Jake talked about last time to a dirty chamber. If you're shooting a lot of steel case tends to expand, and the polymer coating will heat up and actually glue itself in there sometimes. Tighter chambers do it, depending for any number of reasons. All right. So second malfunction that kind of follows the same. I'm going to lock it back again. I'm going to refill this mag. All right. And I'm going to just toss a bullet in there. All right. And now you can see you've got a true double feed. All right. This is where both tips are trying to get into the same hole. Typical college night problem.
That's right.
So we call this a failure to eject. So it was able to extract, and I take that back. This is usually just a magazine issue.
Could be a magazine issue.
The failure to eject is another one.
Could be a short stroking gas issue too, if that bolt carrier doesn't go all the way back and have a full amount of time for that magazine to push the next round up.
Well, typically when you've got two live rounds in the same hole, the feed lips are failing, and it's letting two loose as it's going forward. So again, what's our trigger going to do for this? With the bolt halfway open, we're going to get a mush again. All right. So we are going to, at this point, you can lock the mag back. Lock it back. All right. And we're just going to remove the mag and do the same thing. We're going to come up in here and sort of finger fuck them out. So close the bolt, rack it, make sure everything seems running right, and you can reload. All right. Now, we didn't really talk tactical. We mentioned the clicks and all that. So if you are shooting and you get a click, all right, the typical fix for that, tap rack, right? We've all heard that. Tap, rack, re-engage. All right. And that would be more of a on the range, something's happening in the middle of it.
Usually your failure to fires that'd be the first thing you do administratively. And if you do get a failure to fire and that round does not extract, let's say you get a light primer strike and it doesn't extract all the way, that'll probably induce then a double feed, and then you have to pull the mag, rack the bolt, get those bad rounds out of there, put a new mag in, gas up, and go.
All right, so typically when you hear the click, a lot of people think tap rack from the click because it means your bolt is fully closed on something. It could mean your bolt catch didn't stop it, and you actually just have an empty mag in there. All right, so next one.
Most of the time, your malfunction, your first one's going to be that failure to fire. Next would probably be a double feed, and then we'll get into some more rare cases as we go on here.
See if I can do this. All right, so what do we call this? And then somebody in the class raises their hand, stovepipe. And that is typically what you've heard it called. This would be the one that I misspoke earlier, the failure to eject, which means the round went off and the bolt cycled and it did not kick it out of the gun far enough. Could be the ejector spring worn. Could be that you're shooting up against cover. You've seen them bounce right back in and catch them like this, especially working with a barricade and things like that. So people have always taught to just strip it with your hand, but that's a great way to have a nice scar down your hand and have to use your tourniquet. So again, this your trigger. Even if you don't notice, you may get a click if it's far enough forward. You may get a mush depending on where it's caught. But if you tap rack, we may cause another malfunction, in hopes that you see it, in your peripheral. So we're going to drop the ammunition source, and typically come out and obviously clear the rifle, reload, etc. All right. Other than triple feed / bolt over brass, is there anything?
Let's see. Now, if you keep going, I'll chime in if I think of something.
So this one will take me kind of half a second here to set up. All right. And it's probably going to be pretty hard to even show you guys on camera here.
So this next one that he's setting up is called a bolt over brass. It's probably the most rare malfunction you'll ever get, but when it does happen, it sucks, and it's always good to know how to work through it.
There's a story of Chris Fry always used to tell the story, and it was awesome, of a guy in the military that they spent like 17 hours trying to diagnose and repair this, and until people learned that it was able to be fixed in like 5 minutes. So I'm not sure if you can see, but what you can see is you've got a double feed like the college party, and then up in top there you've got a spent casing. And I did it backwards, so I didn't. I made it a little easy for me. But most of the time, it's the other way, and actually gets pounded over top of your gas tube. So you can see an extra piece of brass. So people call this a triple feed, bolt over brass, and a couple different things. So with the bolt back, it's going to be a mushy trigger. All right. So we're going to try our first diagnosis. All right. We've got what we think is a double feed. We're going to drop the ammunition source. We're going to rack it, and I'm going to reach up and get there. Ah, shit. Okay. What's going on? Well, not only am I making it worse by doing that, I am pounding that brass up into that area there. So what's happened here is that spent piece of brass has made it into the under channel of your charging handle. And if it's facing forward, what you're doing is pounding it over the top of your gas tube. If it's facing backward, I'm probably just bending the spent brass. So the most obvious way to know what's going on here, look how far back my charging handle goes. All right, that's not nearly the length it should be coming back. All right, so what's happening is as I'm pulling it back, it looks like the bolt is moving back, but the charging handle is getting caught up by that piece. So what we need to do here is actually move the bolt carrier group independently of the charging handle in hopes that piece of brass will fall out. So a lot of times you just grab a piece of brass, put it in front of, right on the shoulder of the carrier, and pull back, or right in front of the bolt. There we go. Got it out. Rack it a couple times, reload, reassess. Yep. All right, and you can actually see, look at what it did to that piece of brass just being in there. and smashing it like that.
Another way to clear that bolt override that I picked up in a recent carbine class, if you do have your brass over bolt, I'll just take the rifle there, and let's say that you do have your brass over, your charging handle and bolt carrier are not going to move in conjunction with each other. So what you can do is, if you have small fingers, you can get your hand in there, and then what you can do is just push forward on the charging handle like that, so they move separately, and usually that charging handle will push the bad piece of brass forward and you just let go.
Right. The same idea, it's just you have to get the bolt carrier moving independently of the charging handle, or else they just keep smashing in each other.
Yep.
Last malfunction that I didn't think of would be failure to unlock.
Yep.
So there will be times, especially on dirtier rifles or not well-maintained rifles, is that you go to move your bolt and it won't move at all. All right, so there's a couple different ways that we address this. Typically, in classes I've been in or I've taught, we teach basically bringing your knee up to your chest and hitting it at the same time. This is the only time I really use the claw grip. I'll put my hand on the charging handle, and in one motion, as I hit it against something. All right, and I like to do it standing and bring my knee to it, because I can get a decent amount of force, and I'm not actually structuring myself on the ground where I may be immobile. And certainly, if I'm in the middle of an engagement, I don't want to push myself to the ground like that. What you hear it typically is mortaring, which is where you're on the ground and you do the same thing, collapse your stock, and do it right on the ground. Bad thing about that, like I said, you're immobilized for that minute, and you can break all kinds of parts. You bend this receiver tube, the gun's done.
Yep.
You know,
kind of like a last resort thing. Don't want to do it if you don't have to. Most of the malfunctions can be fixed without having to mortar the rifle and put that undue stress on it.
So there was a comment on last week's that they wanted to talk about the New York difference between New York compliance and everything.
Yep.
So to make this rifle New York compliant, we would replace the mag button with one of our safe mods. Now our safe mod has two set screws that once the magazine's in place, you can push the button here. So to load it, you pull your rear pin, load from here, or you load through the ejection port using something like a bear flag loader. All right, so to actually get a detachable mag AR in New York, you would have to have a fixed stock, so none of this. No pistol grip, so either something like a fin grip or Monte Carlo style stock. Can't have anything at the end of the barrel, so no muzzle brake and no threads, so you'd have to cap it and pin and weld it, or we can cut the threads off. And then you can never put anything under here, because part of the law is something that you can hold with your non-shooting hand. All right, so that's why we push the safe mod, because the gun remains as traditional as possible while still being compliant. Now, as all these malfunction we just talked about, you're kind of SOL when it comes to having a locked mag. You basically would have to take something and disassemble your mag, right? You're going to take your floor plate off, and you're going to pull the whole thing out in hopes that any malfunctions pull out like that.
Yep.
That would be the somewhat fast way.
Yeah, if your failure to fires are fixable with a fixed mag rifle, because it's just a tap rack at that point. If you do get a double feed, like Mike said, the easiest way that we've thought of is to drop the floor plate on your mag. So if you have like a P-mag or a Lancer or something like that, they're pretty easy to take apart. And then all that magazine spring pressure that's pushing up is now relieved, so then all the loose rounds are going to basically fall out.
Right. You hope.
And then at that point, you're going to have to reload the rifle.
So, and the other benefit of our safe mod is that, it's obviously it's not something you're going to do in the middle of a possible firefight, but you have the ability to pull those two set screws and disassemble the rifle. Any of those double feeds, you're not going to be able to separate the upper from the lower. Nope. Because your carrier is going to be partially into the lower receiver, and
can't break the gun in half.
No, and there's even both pins and trying to pull it out forward struggles. I've done it.
It's awkward,
but it's tough. Yeah. And it's certainly faster probably to do the mag at that point. Or take it back to your bench, pull those set screws, disassemble the rifle, put it all back together. And of course, diagnose what's going on. A lot of these are caused by poor maintenance. You know, the stuff we talked about in the last video, the lubrication, keeping it, you know, even mildly clean are going to prevent 90% of these.
Yep.
What else? I think that's it,
That
really.
pretty much covers
Yeah,
it.
it covers your basic malfunctions. Anything further than that, you're going to be bringing it to a gunsmith.
Oh, let's talk about a squib load really quick. So this can kind of seem like a short stroke. Usually it'll set up as, it'll feel like a failure to fire when you're on the range. You'll get a click. You might hear it sound like a little firecracker, not like a full gunshot. The bolt carrier will cycle somewhat. It might not cycle all the way back to put another round in to cause a double feed. So you may go tap rack, pull that empty shell casing out, which seems all normal and good, and you pop another round in there, and you have a bullet still in the barrel, and you go to fire, and then your gun basically explodes.
Yeah, that's very bad.
If you do experience a squib load, it's going to sound like a weird muffled crack or a pop.
It'll sound significantly different
Yeah.
from the normal sound that your rifle would be making.
The bolt carrier will it'll short stroke. It might reset the hammer, and you might get a click. That's okay, as long as it doesn't put another round in there for you, or you go to tap rack.
Right.
And then in that case, what you want to do is, if you have like a long cleaning rod, just go muzzle end first and just tap it out gently with like a hammer or something, and it'll come right out. It's not too difficult to get
Depends
them
on
out.
how far down it is.
Yeah.
You know, we did. I think we did mention last week with the cleaning. You always want to go from chamber out when you're cleaning. But whereas the squib load, you're actually fighting the rifling by trying to push it out that way.
Yep.
So you may be able to slightly tap it. Always use a range rod smaller than your.
Yeah, we've had some customers bring in guns that they know they have squib loads, and I've been able to just tap them out with like a Dewey rod and a hammer gently, depending on how far it is in the rifling. And then we look at the rifling after with a borescope just to make sure it's okay, and usually they're fine. It's not going to hurt it that bad to push the bullet back the other way.
Right. Feel free to bring them in. We got the digital borescopes here. We can take a look and see if there's any issues. If you're not comfortable with any of these malfunctions, even the most basic ones, bring it in. If you want to stop in and have one of our guys go over this exact stuff with you in person, and actually so you can handle it and do some of it, feel free. Once again, like and follow our page, and stay tuned for the next. Maybe I'm sure we got more AR was one coming.
Yep.
Maybe we'll throw in a different one.
Maybe we'll do one this weekend. Maybe we'll put a poll out and see what you guys are interested in, whether it's AR setups, optics.
But we can always jump
whatever.
to another platform while we think of some other stuff.
Yep.
Cameron keeps bitching about doing an AK one.
Yeah. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Again, subscribe to all of our fun social media stuff, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.